The last patient was never discharged, and he's still waiting. There's a wing in Ridgeview Psychiatric Hospital that doesn't appear on any blueprints. No light touches its doors. No staff acknowledges its presence. But last week, an intern nurse wandered in and hasn't been seen since. I know because I used to work there. I was the one who kept records of the patients, and there's one file I was told never to open, patient 1387. But I did, and ever since, he's been waiting. I took the night shift at Ridgeview because I needed the cash and didn't mind the silence. The place was already half abandoned when I started. Whole wings shuttered, entire floors locked off. But the pay was good, and I told myself I didn't believe in ghosts. Until the knocking started. I was assigned to archive patient records in the old West Wing, a part of the hospital supposedly closed off since the 90s after a fire gutted the third floor. The walls smelled of wet plaster and disinfectant that never quite masked the rot beneath. Most of the folders I filed were mundane. Routine discharges, treatment plans, incident reports. But there was one locked drawer in the metal cabinet, dusty and sealed with a hospital padlock. The head nurse, Paula, told me with a stone face, "You don't go into the red drawer. You hear anything from that direction, you keep your head down. Understand?" I nodded. Of course I didn't listen. It was around 2:30 a.m. when I first heard it. 3 slow knocks echoing from the hallway beyond the archive room. It sounded deliberate, as if someone was using their knuckles on concrete. I stood still, waiting for it to stop. Then it repeated, "Knock, knock, knock." There was no one on duty that far west of the hospital. Just me in the dark. I opened the drawer the next night. The lock had already been snapped, hanging useless from its latch. Inside was a single manila folder. It had no label, no patient number, just a crimson handprint smeared across the front. I pulled it out with shaking fingers. Inside, a single intake form, yellowed and water-stained. It had only one word in the name field, written in thick black marker. Unknown. Date of admission, 1973. Date of discharge, never. There were no medical notes, no progress updates, but scribbled along the margins of the paper were dozens of warnings, written in different hands over the decades. Do not move him. Do not acknowledge. Only look if he looks first. At the bottom, in large, childlike handwriting, were 4 words. He's still in there. I heard the knocking again, but this time it came from a wall. I pressed my ear against the concrete, expecting pipes or rats or just old building creaks. Instead, I heard shallow breathing. I stumbled back. The archive room was freezing cold. My breath came out in white puffs. Lights flickered. Somewhere far off, a patient alarm beeped frantically, then flatlined. That's when I noticed something terrifying. The folder was gone. I hadn't moved. I hadn't dropped it. I checked the floor, the desk, even the trash. But it had vanished. In its place, a second folder now sat in the open drawer. This one had a name, Maya Ruskin. My name. The photo attached wasn't me. It was a woman in her mid-20s, in a nurse's uniform like mine, her eyes scratched out with black ink. The form was signed off as admitted. 11:57 p.m., July 17th, 2025. That was today's date. I slammed the drawer shut and ran. There's a hallway just past the archive room that doesn't show on any blueprint. I hadn't noticed it before. It was narrow and dim, the wallpaper peeling like skin. As I passed, old patient nameplates lined the walls. Some were burned. Others had deep gouges like claw marks. No lights flickered in there. Only shadows moved. At the end of the hallway was a door with no handle. A small glass window was inset into the top, smeared with something brownish red on the inside. I knew what I was doing was insane. But I looked. The room was padded, old asylum style. Straps hung from the walls. Chains even. And there, in the corner, hunched over in a hospital gown covered in dried blood, sat a man. Or what had once been a man. His skin was gray, sagging, translucent in places like wax held to a flame. His fingers were long, broken in multiple places, curled like spider legs. He didn't move, but I knew he saw me. His face lifted, slowly, and for the briefest moment, I saw only empty eye sockets. Then he smiled. I ran so fast I dropped my badge and flashlight. But I swear I heard his voice, low and guttural, echo down the hall as I fled. Finally, she's here. I tried to quit the next day. I went to HR, turned in my scrubs, refused to return to the night shift. But the hospital wouldn't acknowledge me. My file had been removed. No record of employment. No badge number. Nothing. It's like I was already a patient. I've been getting voicemails from the hospital since that night. No one speaks. Just static. And knocking. 3 slow knocks. I don't think he's trapped in the ward anymore. I think he's waiting for me to come back. It started with the photo. After the night I saw him, the hollow-eyed patient in the room that shouldn't exist, I destroyed the folder with my name on it. Burned in my kitchen sink. I even moved to a different town and started sleeping with the lights on. For 2 months, everything was quiet. Then the photo arrived in the mail. No return address. No postmark. Just a single Polaroid inside a plain white envelope. A blurry, grainy image of me standing in the hallway of Ridgeview. The strange part? I'd never seen that photo before. And in the background, barely visible in the far left corner, was a shadowy figure with no face. He was watching me. I called Paula, the head nurse, desperate for answers. She didn't pick up. Instead, I got an auto reply. This number has been disconnected. I drove back to Ridgeview that night. The hospital was different. The large sign out front, Ridgeview Psychiatric Hospital, was gone. In its place was a scorched frame, blackened and melted as if struck by lightning. The parking lot was empty. When I stepped inside, the lobby was dimly lit, as if someone had turned the lights to half power. Reception was abandoned. No humming vending machines, no distant beeping of vitals, no fluorescent hum. Just silence. And that smell again, bleach, mold, and something else, wet copper. There were no staff, no security, just the same peeling linoleum floors and the walls lined with fading motivational posters. I made my way to the West Wing, back to the archive room. Everything was just as I left it, almost. My flashlight flickered as I approached the file cabinet. The red drawer was open again, and this time, no folders inside. Just a single bracelet, the kind they give patients. I picked it up. Name, Maya Ruskin. Admit date, ongoing. Ward, 3B, isolation. Status, in treatment. I dropped it. That was impossible. I had never been admitted. I was never a patient. This was a sick joke. But when I turned around, the hallway was gone. Instead of the West Wing, I stood in a long corridor that shouldn't exist. The walls were no longer paint and drywall, but old stone, like a Victorian basement. Damp, cold. The air buzzed faintly, and every few feet, a single bare bulb swung from the ceiling, casting dizzying shadows. The door behind me had vanished. I moved forward. My footsteps echoed on the wet floor. Somewhere ahead, a door creaked open, then shut again. A voice whispered, "Back on shift, Nurse Ruskin." It was soft, barely audible, but it made my skin crawl. I turned to look behind me. No one. Then something brushed my ankle. I froze. A long, thin hand, pale and broken at the joints, was reaching from beneath the wall. The fingers twitched as they scraped the floor. I screamed and ran. I found myself in a small padded room, identical to the one I saw before. The same straps, same flickering light overhead. But this time he was standing. Patient 1387. His figure was impossibly tall now, shoulders brushing the ceiling. His hospital gown hung off him like wet paper. His mouth was split too wide, lips cracked, teeth blackened with rot. His empty eyes stared into mine, not with rage, but with familiarity. Like he knew me. He spoke. His voice wasn't human. It was echoes, whispers, groans, all layered into one. "You open the file. You open the door. Now you're part of the ward." I backed into a corner. "I don't belong here," I whispered. He tilted his head. "But you never left." I ran again, deeper this time, into a hallway that bled into a staircase that led into a room filled with old patient beds. Metal cots lined the walls, some rusted, some still occupied. Figures lay under sheets. At first, I thought they were mannequins, until one moved. Another began weeping softly. They all wore the same wristband I had found. Mine. He never discharged us. We looked. There's no exit. I turned to run, but the door slammed shut behind me. The lights flickered. That's when I saw the security camera in the corner. An old, dust-covered thing, but the red light blinked. Someone was watching me. I fought with the door, yanked it open, and stumbled out into what should have been the east hallway. But now it was a garden inside the hospital. Concrete overgrown with vines. Chairs made of hospital gurneys. A small fountain bubbled in the center, filled with blood. I wasn't alone. Patients sat around it, motionless, staring at the floor. Their skin looked stretched, sunken, dried out like old leather. They didn't move until I stepped forward. Then, in unison, they all looked up and said, "We've been waiting, Nurse Ruskin." I escaped through a side door I hadn't seen before, tumbling into the hospital parking lot, gasping, crying, only to realize the hospital behind me was gone. In its place was an empty field. But when I looked down, I still had the bracelet on, and under admit date, it now read. Never admitted, never discharged, never free. They told me Ridgeview was gone, just rubble and forgotten records. But last night, I woke up in my nurse's scrubs, standing in a hallway that no longer exists. And the patients, they're still waiting. I woke up in my apartment, drenched in sweat, the apartment stifling and full of static. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, but when I checked it, nothing. No texts, no notifications. But the clock read 3:33 a.m. And there it was again, a folder, right on the kitchen counter. I hadn't placed it there. Inside, a single yellowed intake form for patient number 1387. Diagnosis, untreatable, unmovable, unrecorded. Signed at the bottom in faded red ink. Discharge denied. And then, scratched onto the back in my handwriting. You forgot me. I didn't remember writing that. Hell, I didn't remember how I got home. The last thing I remembered was the hallway, those doors, the echo of that voice, and then a blankness. Like the film reel of my life just skipped. So I did the only thing I could think to do. I went back. Ridgeview was gone, but the land still felt sick. The lot was overgrown, yes, but the weeds grew in circles, spiraling around a single cement slab that hadn't been cleared. It looked like part of the old basement flooring, maybe the foundation of the isolation wing. When I stepped onto it, everything changed. The temperature dropped. The world went silent. Even the birds stopped chirping. And then the wind carried it. That damn elevator bell. When I turned, the rusted elevator stood right behind me again, door open, light flickering. Inside was the same hallway from before, but this time the lights were darker, dimmer, and a single sound played from inside. Nurse Maya, report to Ward 13. The last patient is awake. I stepped in, because by now I understood this wasn't a haunting. This was a shift. The hospital was not how I remembered it. It was a labyrinth now, twisting halls that didn't follow physics. Stairwells that looped back onto themselves. Doors that led into rooms with no exit. I followed signs that flickered between Ward 13, intake, and, oddly, you. As I walked, old memories flickered in the edges of my mind. Had I worked here? Really? Had I signed a contract? Was I the one who checked 1387 in? The question pounded with every step. And then I found it. Ward 13. Sealed behind a massive iron door. On it was a keypad, smeared in dry blood. I didn't know the code, but my hand moved on its own. 1-3-8-7. Click. The room inside was massive. Dark. The walls were lined with leather straps and restraints, rusted metal bed frames, and peeling murals of smiling children, drawn over with scratch marks and black X's. A single gurney stood in the center. Strapped to it was patient 1387. But he wasn't human. Not anymore. His eyes were lidless, white and glowing. His limbs were far too long, his jaw distended just slightly. Beneath the restraints, he writhed but not in pain, in anticipation, as if he'd been waiting for me. You're late, he whispered. I stepped back. This place isn't real, I said aloud. You're not real. Neither are you, he replied. Suddenly, The mirrors along the room's perimeter fogged, then cleared. I saw versions of myself in everyone. Me in a straitjacket, me strapped to the gurney, me smiling with rotted teeth, me already dead. You've always been part of the ward, 1387 said. But you pretended to be staff. You thought the clipboard made you safe, that the badge meant you were in control. You started laughing, low, broken, teeth clicking like gears. I ran. The hallway out had changed. It was now a library, floor to ceiling with metal filing cabinets. Patient records stretching back decades, all labeled with cryptic numbers and faded names. And then I found it, a drawer labeled Maya R. I opened it. Inside was a discharge form, blank except for a note at the bottom. Replacement required. Taped beside it was a black and white photograph. Me, standing in the hospital lobby, smiling, as a patient is wheeled behind me. That patient was 1387. He hadn't always looked like a monster. He used to look like my brother. The hallway began to shake. The cabinets rattled. Lights burst one by one, plunging the corridor into flickering darkness. I turned, and there he was, 1387, unstrapped, standing upright. But now he looked just like me. He smiled. Your shift is over, Maya. And then, everything went black. I snapped awake in my own bed again. Daylight streamed in through the window. My clothes were damp. The folder from before was gone. No sign of the hospital. No sign of 1387. For a moment, I believed it was over, until my phone buzzed with a new voicemail. Unknown number. I played it. Nurse Maya, you missed your shift. Ward 13 is waiting. Last patient still remains. Final transfer scheduled. And then, a click. I looked at my wrist and found a white hospital band strapped tight to my skin. The name on it wasn't mine. It read, Patient number 1387. When I awoke with patient number 1387's ID band on my wrist, I thought it was just another dream. But the voice on the phone said my final transfer had been approved. Now I know. I was never the nurse. I was the replacement. I didn't remember putting the hospital bracelet on. I certainly didn't remember anyone calling me in the night. But there it was, patient number 1387, etched in pale blue ink across the white band. I tried to pull it off. It didn't budge. I grabbed a pair of scissors and sliced through the plastic. It didn't cut. The moment the blade touched it, the bracelet hissed like it was alive. A thin stream of black liquid oozed from the edges, vanishing before it reached the floor. This wasn't plastic. It was something else. Then the lights in my apartment went out, and the hallway outside whispered my name. I didn't call the cops. I didn't call anyone. Something deeper than fear had settled inside me. Resignation. This wasn't a haunting. It wasn't a dream. It was a summons. I walked outside, and the world was wrong again. Fog laced the streets. No cars passed. No lights blinked in any windows. It was as though I was the only person left. Until I turned the corner. There it stood, where my apartment building should have been, a fully intact Ridgeview asylum. Its walls whole, its lights on, the main doors wide open. And behind those doors I saw myself waiting. In nurse's scrubs. Smiling. I stepped inside. The walls breathed with decay. The wallpaper peeled like scabs. The intercom crackled constantly. Whispers, laughter, soft sobbing. Signs hung crooked. Intake. Observation. No visitors after dark. All rooms full. And everywhere I looked, patients but not like before. Some had no faces. Just mouths. Others floated instead of walked. One woman was fused to the ceiling, blinking rapidly, whispering prayers backwards. And yet, they all bowed slightly as I passed. Welcome back, 1387, they murmured. Ready for your final evaluation? I was led, by no one, yet unmistakably herded, to a narrow chamber marked observation. Restricted personnel only. Inside were a dozen one-way mirrors, each labeled with a patient number. But when I looked through them, I saw me. In one, I was a child, wandering the halls of Ridgeview holding a red balloon. In another, I sat catatonic in a chair, whispering the same word, discharged. One showed me being wheeled into a room, strapped to a gurney. Another showed me strapping someone else down. Each reflection flickered like tape stuck on loop. I pressed my hand to one of the mirrors. It was warm. The reflection touched back. Then the mirror shattered from the inside. A hand reached through the shards. My hand but rotted, its veins pulsing black. It grabbed my wrist and whispered in my voice. You were never the nurse. You were the trial. And you failed. Then the hand pulled me forward, and I fell through the glass. I landed in a padded room. Doorless. Windowless. Except for one slot in the wall. And through it slid a file. My file. Name, Maya Roswell. Status, undiagnosed, unstable. Treatment, integration pending. Notes, has formed delusion of being a nurse. Responds aggressively to discharge discussion. Attempts to exit ward must be denied. Subject believes she is outside of the institution. The file fluttered from my hand, and across from me sat patient number 1387. Except now, he looked like composite. His face morphed between mine, my mother's, my brother's, and dozens of others I didn't know, but felt I'd hurt. You made your rounds, he said, but you never clocked out. I stood. This isn't real. I don't belong here. He laughed. Then why is your record the only one that rewrites itself? I blinked. Behind him, a patient folder flipped open, and the ink on the pages began to melt, dripping, rearranging, reshaping into new sentences. She has returned. She accepts a role. The ward is whole again. A door appeared. It hadn't been there before. Above it, a sign, discharge approved. Patient 1387 stepped aside, smiling. You may leave now, he said, but you won't be the same. I didn't hesitate. I pushed through. Blinding white light filled my vision, and the sound of screaming metal, of 1,000 locks opening at once. Then silence, and I woke up again. I was in my apartment, the real one. Morning light peeked through the curtains. No bracelet, no hospital gown, no folder. I wanted to believe it was over. Then I turned on the TV. The news was on. An abandoned psychiatric hospital on the east side spontaneously erupted in flames early this morning. Authorities confirmed the building was empty. The only trace found? A single, undated patient file labeled 1387 left in the ashes. The anchor's face froze mid-sentence, just stopped moving. The screen began to bleed at the edges, and a voice whispered through the static. Last shift begins now. My front door creaked open, and a bell rang. Ding, just like the elevator. I thought it was over, but when I opened my front door and heard that familiar hospital chime, I knew the truth. Ridgeview never let anyone go, and I was never the nurse. I was always patient number 1387, and now I'm not alone. The elevator bell echoed again. Ding. I hadn't heard it in years. Not in this building. Not in reality. And yet, it rang just as my front door creaked open by itself. I stood frozen in the hallway. The morning sun outside just vanished, as if someone dragged blackout curtains over the sky. Fog curled into the room like smoke from a forgotten fire. Inside the elevator stood no one, but the panel was lit. Floor -13. My apartment building didn't have more than 5 floors, and it definitely didn't have a negative floor. But the doors stayed open, waiting, inviting. So I stepped in. The descent took far too long. The elevator didn't hum. It groaned like it was being dragged downward by chains rather than cables. Then the lights flickered, and the air became wet and metallic, like breathing in blood. When the doors opened, I wasn't in an apartment building anymore. I was back at Ridgeview, but this time it wasn't ruined. It was pristine, untouched, clean white tiles, fluorescent lights, medical charts, and clipboards hung neatly from wall hooks. A voice echoed overhead. Welcome to Ward -13. Final discharge evaluations in progress. I walked. The halls bent in impossible angles. Some sloped downward, like ramps into the earth's gut. Others spiraled upward, but led to the same place. The nurses' station. Only there were no nurses. Just mirrors, lining every wall, stretching the hallway into infinity. Each mirror reflected me, but slightly wrong. One showed me older, one younger, one had a stitched mouth, one grinned too wide, one version bled from the eyes. Another clutched a bloody clipboard and whispered, "You've already been processed." But one reflection just stood there, still, silent. And then it moved without me. It raised its finger and pointed to the door behind me. Room 1387. I turned the knob. Inside was a single hospital bed, its sheets neatly folded. A chair sat beside it, turned away, as if someone had just been sitting there. There were drawings taped all over the walls. Childlike sketches, crayon and charcoal. They showed figures in beds, all alone. Figures strapped to walls. Some were headless. Others were just shadows. In the farthest corner, one drawing was different. Photorealistic. It showed me, staring at this very drawing. I backed away, but the door behind me was gone. So was the mirror. So was the floor. I wasn't in a room anymore. I was inside his memory. I saw a Ridgeview from his eyes, from the patient who'd never left. I saw the needles, the restraints, the voices, the endless interviews that blurred into electric screams. I saw doctors whispering, circling his bed like vultures, using terms like irreparable containment and non-human cognition. And I saw him watching one person more than any other. Me, a young intern, long ago, still in training, assigned to a psych case that no one else wanted. Back when I thought I could save people. Back when I believed I was a nurse. The memory shifted. I saw myself, standing beside his bed, clipboard in hand, bored and disinterested, nodding through his stories, marking him as delusional, recommending sedation. And then I saw it, what I had forgotten all this time. I wasn't assigned to him. I volunteered, because no one else wanted him, because I was curious, because I thought the stories about him were funny. But what I said on my final report sealed his fate. Patient remains non-responsive. Recommend indefinite hold. No next of kin. No exit plan required. I didn't think anyone would read it, but they did, and he never left. The world exploded into ash. I was back in the padded room again, but this time he stood in front of me, fully formed. Not a specter, not a memory. Real, tangible, breathing. His face flickered through every version of himself I'd ever seen. Child, elder, ghost, shadow, reflection, until it settled on one that looked eerily like my own. He spoke calmly. You want a story, Maya? You got one. You wrote me into silence. I shook my